So John is the last surviving apostle, the final eyewitness of Jesus, still alive at the end of the first century. While every other apostle is remembered as martyred, John lives into old age, likely into the 90s AD, ministering in Ephesus. And in his final years, he's fighting the first major heresy of the church that it ever faced, Docetism. It's the idea that Jesus only seemed human, that he didn't have real flesh. He didn't really suffer, and he didn't leave footprints when he walked. This is why John opens up his first letter with courtroom language. He says, "That which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have touched with our hands." He's saying, nah, Jesus was real flesh and blood. And his gospel drives home the same point, that the word became flesh. This is John's final writings, being the last stand of an eyewitness insisting on the humanity of Jesus, the real humanity of Jesus. All right, y'all. So let's talk about succession, or this idea of apostolic succession. John discipled Polycarp. Polycarp discipled Irenaeus. This is the clearest chain of transmission we have from the apostles into the second century. Polycarp grew up under John's teachings in Asia Minor. Irenaeus later writes that he remembers Polycarp describing what he had heard from John, the tone of his voice, the stories he told, the teachings he passed down. And when Irenaeus steps into leadership, he's fighting a more developed version of the same heresy John fought, Gnosticism, which denied the real humanity of Christ. But here's the important part. Even with this legitimate connection to the apostles, Irenaeus still gets some things wrong, like claiming Jesus lived into his 40s and 50s. And that's okay. It shows us that succession is about faithfulness, not infallibility. Let's keep it going. All right, so when people hear apostolic succession, they often think of a bishop to bishop chain stretching back to an apostle. But historically, that's not what the earliest Christians meant. For Irenaeus, succession wasn't about mystical authority. It was about preserving the apostolic teaching against Gnostic claims of secret revelation or secret knowledge. And here's the key. The only verifiable apostolic teaching we possess today is the New Testament. We can't reconstruct every bishop in every city. We can't verify every oral tradition. And even the earliest succession lists contain legendary elements. So apostolic succession isn't about tracing your church back to an apostle. It's about recognizing and preserving what the apostles actually gave us. And that's the scripture. Period. When the apostles died, Christianity didn't collapse. A new generation rose up, the bridge generation. Clement of Rome wrote to Corinth around AD 96, urging unity and quoting scripture constantly. Ignatius of Antioch, on his way to martyrdom, he wrote 7 letters defending the real humanity of Christ. Polycarp of Smyrna carried John's teachings into the 2nd century. Papias collected oral traditions from those who knew the apostles. Quadratus and Aristides wrote the first Christian apologies to Roman emperors. The Didache community preserved early Christian teachings or practices, and the Shepherd of Hermas shows us the pastoral struggles of ordinary believers. These are the men and communities who carried the faith from the age of eyewitnesses to the age of the church. Let's keep it going. So to understand the 2nd century, you will have to step out of the modern world. There's no printing press, no mass literacy, no standardized liturgy. Most Christians meet in homes. Many can't even read. Manuscripts are copied by hand. Churches are scattered across the empire, often isolated from one another. The letters that one church may have, another church in a different area may not have. The New Testament canon is forming at this time, but not yet fixed. And heresies spread through charismatic teachers, not books or podcasts. This is a world where memory matters, manuscripts are precious, and persecution is always a possibility. If we judge the second century by 21st century expectations, we'll misunderstand everything they were trying to do. So I really want you guys to put your minds in their context and your feet in their shoes. So persecution begins inside Judaism. Expulsions from synagogues, beatings, imprisonment, even executions. Jesus warned his disciples this would happen. He said, "The hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God." But when persecution becomes imperial, the first emperor to spill Christian blood is Nero. After the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64, Nero blamed the Christians and unleashed torture so brutal that even pagan historians were shocked. He burned them alive, crucified them, and fed them to the animals. Now here's the correction. Domitian was not the great persecutor many people imagine. Modern Roman historians, especially Brian W. Jones, shows that there is no solid ancient evidence that Domitian targeted Christians at all. There's no first century Roman historian that records it. And the story that Domitian exiled John to Patmos, so that actually comes from Eusebius, who's writing 200 years later with no real Roman historical source. You know what I'm saying? So you got to take it for what it is. The real historical backdrop of the persecution in the first century is Nero, is not Domitian. By the end of the first century, y'all, the apostles are gone. The eyewitness era is over. The second century becomes the age of memory, manuscripts, and martyrdom. That's a bar. Leaders like Polycarp, Ignatius, and Irenaeus, they're not inventing new doctrines, they're guarding what they've received already. The New Testament becomes the anchor, the fixed written record of apostolic teaching. And the church begins to grow from a small, persecuted minority into a global movement. This is the turning point, the moment Christianity steps out of the shadow of the apostles and into history. So at this point, we are 70 years past the events. As far as apologetics go, this is going to be an exciting time.